I was the crown prince's favorite consort, and he doted on me endlessly, but he had no idea that I was a spy from the enemy state. For 3 consecutive years, I had secretly sent intelligence back home. Later, the crown prince ascended the throne, and he intended to make me his empress. I could no longer hold back and went to find my contact. Becoming empress wasn't part of the mission. When can I withdraw? My contact stared blankly. The 2 states made peace 3 years ago. Didn't you know? I was also stunned. Then who had I been sending all that intelligence to all these years? In the dead of night, the emperor held me tenderly in his arms. My beloved, let me read you a bedtime story. The more I listened, the more alert I became. Damn it, this was the intelligence letter I'd written. The emperor froze for a moment. Oh, wrong book. He slowly picked up another one. Once upon a time, there was a mountain, and on the mountain, there was a temple. What? They made peace. In a desolate little inn, I slammed my palm on the table so hard it rattled, on the verge of falling apart. The plump aunt across from me looked horrified and quickly stopped me. Yes, 3 years ago, all our Faeyun Pavilion strongholds in the Chi state have been withdrawn. Didn't you know? I had no idea. I screamed inwardly. Faeyun Pavilion was a secret intelligence organization established by the court of the Li state. The organization would select and train suitable candidates, then plant them as spies in other states to steal secrets, and I, Nai Wei-chun, was the top spy of Faeyun Pavilion. I had infiltrated the Chi state 7 years ago, spent 3 years capturing the crown prince's heart, and 1 year becoming his favorite consort. Then I had sent intelligence to the organization for 3 consecutive years. Diligent, conscientious, never daring to slack off, truly a model spy of the times. If the Qi emperor hadn't suddenly passed away, Crown Prince Shunshin hadn't ascended the throne in a hurry, and hadn't waved his hand to make me empress, I would never have panicked and rushed to the stronghold recklessly. After all, I'd never done anything that might expose my identity before, but I was desperate. When I first came to the Qi state, my superiors only told me to lurk beside the crown prince. They never said anything about becoming empress. If I were just an insignificant nobody, I could fake my death and escape someday. But once I became empress, it would be nearly impossible for me to get away scot-free in the future. At this moment, sitting in this shabby little inn, the sky seemed to turn completely grey, just like my life. The Li and Qi states had always been mortal enemies. How could they suddenly make peace? Even if they did, why wasn't I informed? Even if I wasn't informed, I couldn't let this slide. I'd settle the score when I went back someday. Then I began to blame myself. I'd lived too happily these days, listening to ditties, admiring flowers, wandering into Shunshin's study every now and then to pick out useful news to send back. And the result? I didn't even know the 2 states had made peace. What a dereliction of duty. Nai Wei-chun, you're no longer a qualified spy. 2 lines of clear tears streamed down my cheeks. The plump aunt exclaimed, "Don't cry, the organization must have forgotten to inform you. I'll send a message back to ask, and I'll make sure everything is arranged for you." I grabbed her hand, tears streaming down my face. As soon as possible. The Empress coronation ceremony was next month. I was in a hurry, too. I put on a cloak, fully disguised, and walked out the back door of the little inn. After winding through several alleys, I climbed over the wall into a clothing shop. When I changed my clothes and came out, my maid Xiaorong was pacing around anxiously. She hurried up to me and whispered, "Your Majesty, the palace gates are about to close." I nodded. This shop has novel styles. I tried on a few more pieces. I took out an ingot of silver and handed it to the shopkeeper. "Wrap them all up." The shopkeeper left beaming. And I walked out of the shop and got into the luxurious carriage parked at the door. I wanted to close my eyes and rest, but Xiaorong was a chatterbox. "Your Majesty, did you enjoy going out of the palace today, Your Majesty?" I heard the Ministry of Rites has almost finished preparing for the Empress coronation. His Majesty dotes on you so much, he grants every wish of yours. You can go out of the palace whenever you want, and he even sends bodyguards to protect you closely. Everyone envies you now, Your Majesty. Me. Just thinking about Shun gave me a headache again. Back when Shun was still the crown prince, he'd accidentally fallen off a cliff during the spring hunt. I'd approached him posing as a hunter's daughter and saved him. Grateful for my life-saving grace, he'd taken me back to the East Palace after learning I was alone in the world. After 3 years together, his love for me had grown deep, and he doted on me alone. Everyone said I had an unclear background, but every time he heard such talk, he'd fly into a rage. I know better than any of you whether my beloved has a proper background. Dare to speak nonsense again. And I'll let you check if the road to the underworld is proper. Thanks to his exclusive favor, I'd lived a rather comfortable life in the Chi state all these years. I pinched the little layer of fat that had grown around my waist and sighed. I wondered if I'd still be able to fly with my lightness skill when I ran away someday. As for Shun, I felt guilty toward him. But there was no other way. I'd have to find a chance to make amends later. I let my thoughts wander the entire way back. And it was already dark when we returned to the palace. The head eunuch Fulai came over with a smile. Your Majesty hasn't dined yet, has she? His Majesty is waiting for you in the Hanchun Palace. Oh, I forgot to mention, Shun was a clingy man. 3. After dinner, I freshened up and lay down on the bed. Shun, dressed in a thin inner robe, was still handling memorials beside me. He had only just ascended the throne, and there was a mountain of things for him to deal with. But he refused to stay in the imperial study, saying it was cold and lifeless there, nothing like the warmth of being with me. He'd had a desk set up in my room, and he'd approve memorials there every night. Shaken by what had happened today, I lay there for a long time without a hint of sleepiness. Staring at the bed curtains above my head, a sudden thought struck me, and I sat up abruptly as if jolted back to life from a fatal illness. If all the strongholds had been withdrawn, then who had been taking the intelligence I'd sent for 3 years? The organization had told me to leave the intelligence behind the third brick from the left on the back wall of the East Palace regularly, and a special person would come to collect it. That's exactly what I'd been doing for 3 years. Every time I went, the intelligence I'd left the previous time would be gone, taken away. Otherwise, I would have noticed something was wrong long ago. At the thought, cold sweat broke out on my back. The plump aunt said everyone had left. Then who had been taking my intelligence all these years? That person knew I was a spy from the enemy state. And why hadn't they reported me? The more I thought, the more flustered I became, and I couldn't help but let out a cry. Oh no, clatter. The memorial in Shun's hand fell to the ground in a fright. He turned to look at me, then bent down to pick it up. What's wrong, my beloved? He asked. I turned to look at him, my face pale with dread. I had a nightmare. I dreamed that I was going to die. I really was close to death. According to the iron rules of Feiyun Pavilion, a spy must commit suicide immediately once their identity is exposed. It's a show of loyalty to the country, and also a way to keep one's dignity. Shun said nothing. His eyes, reflecting the orange candlelight, looked tender and affectionate. I heard him let out a soft sigh, then set down the memorial in his hand. Without me by your side, you always have nightmares. Action. What would you do without me? I froze for a moment, memories flooding back. I'd made up those words once to get close to Shun. Back when I'd just been brought to the East Palace by him, I'd fallen gravely ill. Even in my sickness, I'd abided by the spy's code. And to win his pity, I'd often clung to his sleeve in my sleep. I'd lied to him, saying I had nightmares when I was away from him. Since then, he'd stayed with me every night. If he couldn't, he'd place one of his usual robes beside my pillow. It had become a habit over time. Shun stood up and blew out the candle on the table. He lay down gently beside me and pulled me into his arms. Is this better? I nodded, and the familiar scent of him made my nose tingle with soreness. All right, sleep now. He patted me, his movements soft and gentle. His breathing gradually grew long and steady, but I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. Shun was woken up by my restlessness. He let out a helpless sigh. Still can't sleep. I sat up to get out of bed. I'll sleep in the side chamber. I won't disturb you. He pulled me back down with a chuckle. It's fine. How about I read you a story? I looked at him in confusion. What story? He casually pulled a book out of the box under the bed, flipped it open at random, and read it aloud without a second thought. Still half asleep, Shun had a beautiful voice, and it was a little hoarse at the moment. 7th day of the 6th lunar month, Prince Nanyang of Qi and Crown Prince Shun held a discussion in the East Palace regarding the earthquake in the south. My eyes widened abruptly. This, damn it. Why does this sound so familiar? This was the intelligence letter I'd written last year. I turned to stare at Shun in terror. His voice faltered for a moment. He patted my head, then slowly closed the booklet. Wrong book. Let me change another one. Brother, this isn't something that can be fixed just by changing a book. Shun acted as if nothing had happened, opening another book. Once upon a time, there was a mountain, and on the mountain, there was a temple, where an old monk and an old nun lived. What kind of messy book is this? Shun muttered. Then couldn't help but yawn. My beloved, it's time to sleep. I watched him put both books back into the box under the bed, then roll over and fall fast asleep immediately. He must have been extremely tired. I, on the other hand, was wide awake. His calmness made me doubt myself. Did I mishear that just now? Was that really my intelligence letter he was reading? It couldn't be, right? But it sounded exactly like it. I climbed out of bed lightly, about to step over Shun to reach for the box. But he stretched out his long arm and pulled me into his arms. Helpless, he said, "My beloved, I have to go to court early tomorrow. Have mercy on me." I lay on his chest, holding my breath. I'd planned to act after he fell fast asleep, but his embrace was too warm, and before I knew it, I'd also fallen asleep. 3. When I woke up the next day, Shun was already gone, and the little box was gone too. I broke out in a cold sweat. Xiaorong came in from outside. "Your Majesty is awake. This servant will help you freshen up." Shun was as usual, and no matter how I probed tentatively, he showed no signs of abnormality. Yet the cloud of doubt in my heart grew heavier by the day. Half a month later, the splendid villa outside the palace sent over the Empress's crown and robes. Tucked inside them, I found a note. "Midnight tonight, West Glory Gate. Return to Lee State." Beneath it was a tiny Feiyun pavilion seal. I suppressed my excitement and burned the note carefully. That plump aunt was reliable. Finally, this life of fear and anxiety was coming to an end. I was finally going to retire after completing my mission. Shun came to my courtyard as usual that night. I lit the sleeping incense, and in no time, his eyes grew heavy with drowsiness. His eyes closed. He held me tight. "My beloved, I've realized I truly can't live without you. Will you stay by my side forever?" "I will," I coaxed him softly, gently prying his hand away from my waist. Shun was fast asleep. I moved swiftly, changing into night clothes and slinging a bundle over my shoulder. Before leaving, I turned to look at him one last time. His sleeping face was peaceful, only his brows were slightly furrowed, as if he was dreaming of something troubling. I sighed, unable to resist stepping forward to smooth the crease between his brows, then bent down and pressed a kiss to his cheek. Shun, take care." I was grateful my lightness skill hadn't rusted too much. The journey was fraught with near misses, but I finally reached the West Glory Gate promptly at midnight. I crouched at the appointed spot and imitated the call of a cuckoo twice, but there was no response from the other side. What was going on? The person Feiyun Pavilion sent was really unreliable. Seeing the time for the Imperial Guard's shift drawing near, I didn't have time to hesitate and leaped into the air, in the shadow of a corner outside the West Glory Gate. A dark figure stood rigidly upright. I frowned and walked over quickly. "Why didn't you answer my signal just now? Which branch of Faeyun Pavilion are you from?" "Why?" I reached out and patted his shoulder. The figure stiffened, and at the light touch, fell straight backward to the ground. His face was ashen, and he was clearly no longer alive. A knife was plunged into his chest, the blood already dry. I was filled with terror. The operation was exposed. I reacted quickly and turned to run. But a circle of hidden guards had silently surrounded me. I was doomed. A cold chill ran from my head to my toes. I watched as the hidden guards stepped aside in unison, and a figure walked over slowly. He was still wearing the familiar bright yellow inner robe I knew so well. With only an outer robe draped over it, Shunshin looked at me from a distance, his expression unreadable. "My beloved." I heard him call my name. The sweet, doting whisper that used to warm my heart now sounded like the murmur of a ghost. My whole body went numb, and I froze where I stood. Shunshin waved me over. "Come to me," for I was locked in the cold palace. Yes, the cold palace, not a dungeon. I found this strange too. What on earth was Shunshin thinking? Now that he'd discovered I was a spy from the enemy state, even if the two countries had made peace, he shouldn't have let me off so easily, right? There was a trick here. Definitely a trick. I sat in the courtyard, took a sip of fresh fruit wine, and frowned, deep in thought. Well, if it isn't Consort Roang, the soon-to-be crowned empress. A delicate, coquettish voice came from the gate. I turned to look, and saw an exquisitely dressed noble woman walking over with her chin slightly raised. Oh. It was Lin Shuang, the daughter of Qi State's left prime minister, and one of the concubines who had entered the palace after Shunshin ascended the throne. She'd never liked me before, thinking I was of low birth and shallow character, but she dared not move against me openly, for fear of Shunshin's doting on me. But now, I had committed a great crime, angered the emperor, and the news of my being thrown into the cold palace had spread throughout the harem. No one knew exactly what crime I'd committed, but that didn't stop them from coming to kick me while I was down. Lin Shuang was the first to arrive. She sneered, "Consort Roang, the cold palace is a bitter place. You've grown used to a life of ease, so you must be." Her words trailed off as she took in the scene inside the palace, and she gasped in surprise. She looked at the fruit wine and pastries on the table, then at the maid fanning me by my side, and finally at the magnificent decorations and ornaments in the palace, her frown deepening more and more. "This is the cold palace." I stared blankly. "Yes, I think so. If Shunshin said it was, then it must be." Lin Shuang stared at me, and after a long while, her brows relaxed. "Did you bribe the steward eunuch with money?" "You're quite shrewd." Convinced that I had fallen out of favor, she walked slowly up to me, raised her hand, and swept my fruit plate and pastries off the table. "The sinner like you doesn't deserve to eat these." "Me? Why throw away the food when you can just talk? What a waste." Before I joined Faeyun Pavilion, I'd been a beggar, and eating spoiled food was a common occurrence for me. Even when life got better later, I'd always cherished food. At the thought, I couldn't help but look up and glare at her. Lin Shuang flew into a rage. "How dare you glare at me?" My mind was preoccupied with other things, and I really had no time for her. "If you have nothing to do, leave quickly." Lin Shuang looked astonished. "How dare you chase me away? Otherwise," I pointed to the stone bench in front of me, "sit down and have a meal together." She snorted coldly and sat down on the bench directly. "You think I dare not?" It was indeed time for dinner. When plate after plate of delicacies was brought up, Lin Shuang exclaimed, "Nai Wei Chun, how much silver did you give the steward eunuch?" I just smiled and said nothing. "You wouldn't understand, girl," I reminded her. "I know you must be hungry looking at this table of food, but don't eat yet. Someone else is coming." Lin Shuang looked at me suspiciously. glanced behind her, and sighed. "They're here." Shunshin strolled over, and when he saw Lin Shuang, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "Why is Consort Lin here today too?" "Alright, let's eat, I'm hungry." I spoke first and picked up my chopsticks. Lin Shuang stood up clumsily to bow, then stared blankly and said, "Your servant won't disturb your majesty and Consort Rong's meal. I take my leave first." She stumbled out the door. Once outside, Lin Shuang took a deep breath. Who on earth said Nai Wei-chun had fallen out of favor and was crying all day in the cold palace? It was nothing but rumors. If she'd fallen out of favor, would the emperor come to eat with her every day? Would he call her my beloved over and over again? Lin Shuang finally saw the truth. Nai Wei-chun had just moved house, that was all. 5. As the person involved, I looked at Shunshin, who was eating slowly across the table from me, and had countless questions I wanted to ask, but in the end, I swallowed them all, because Shunshin hated talking while eating. After Shunshin finished his meal, he looked up at me with a smile. "Why aren't you eating?" "My beloved, isn't the food to your taste today?" "Thanks, but I can't eat." I used to think Shunshin was an honest and upright man, but now I realized I'd never really known him. I didn't know when he'd seen through my identity as a spy, nor why he'd spared my life, and even less why he could still smile at me and call me my beloved at this moment. Shunshin's thoughts were too deep for me to fathom. He waved his hand behind him, and Fulai stepped forward with a pot of wine. Shunshin said, "This is a new rice wine made by the Imperial Kitchen, sweet and mellow. Try it." I looked at the white porcelain bottle, and memories of the storybooks I'd read once came flooding back. I suddenly realized, this was it. He was finally going to send me on my way with a cup of poisoned wine. Wasn't he? Of course he was. I'd deceived him for so many years by his side. Any normal person would not have been able to bear it. Least of all Shunshin. Letting me die with dignity was probably his last act of kindness. I took the wine he handed me, stroked the smooth wine cup, my hands trembling slightly. After all men fear death. Seeing that I hadn't moved for a long time, Shunshin called out softly, "My beloved." I blurted out instinctively, "Don't rush me." I was still summoning the courage to face death. After a moment, I looked up at him. "I have something to say to you." At Fulai's hearing this, he wisely led the serving maids standing by far away. Only Shunshin and I remained. I took a deep breath and poured out all the words that had been weighing on my chest during this time. "I am a spy trained by Feiyun Pavilion of the Li State. I came to the Qi State 7 years ago, approached you, and have been lurking by your side ever since." I know." Shunshin's voice was calm, without a hint of surprise. I went on, "These years by your side, I was fortunate to have your doting, and I lived a very smooth life. But I really did send a lot of intelligence back from your side. It's only natural for you to hate me and resent me. I have nothing to say. I've deceived you for so long, and I owe you an apology." Very well, I accept it." Staring at his face, I mustered up all my courage. "Actually, I really like you. Since I was a child, no one has ever been this good to me. You'd stay with me to sleep, read me stories, take me to admire flowers in spring, watch snow with me in winter. You'd teach me to read and write, and tell me that a woman can live for herself. But unfortunately, I just couldn't live for myself." Shunshin's voice was gentle. "You remember all that?" "I do." I nodded. "I remember all the good things you've done for me. So I've also tried my best to treat you well. But Shunshin, we were never meant to be. The debt I owe you in this life, I can only repay it in the next." I spoke from the bottom of my heart, my eyes stinging a little. Having said these heartfelt words, I felt a huge weight lift off my chest. Shunshin stared blankly. "You." Before he could finish speaking, I drained the wine in one gulp. A delicate, sweet fragrance spread in my mouth. This poisoned wine is actually quite good, since I was going to die anyway. I picked up the wine pot and drank several more cups. The royal poison really tasted good, And it didn't hurt at all, looking back on my life. I suddenly felt that I had actually been quite happy. Apart from a little suffering when I was young, I had never suffered again since then. According to Fayun Pavilion's iron rules, I should have killed myself the moment I was discovered, but Shunshin had acted too fast, having my weapons and poison confiscated, and even checking every crevice of my teeth with the utmost caution. I had thought he was going to keep me for interrogation. Thanks to him, I was going to die with dignity, without pain. My head began to feel dizzy, and my vision gradually blurred. Shunshin reached out and supported me. I held his hand, buried my face in his palm, and slowly closed my eyes. 6. I opened my eyes in the afternoon of the next day. A splitting headache hit me, and I propped myself up against the bed to sit up. Your Majesty, you're awake. Shurong hurried over to help me. You drank a whole pot of rice wine yesterday and got dead drunk. It was His Majesty who carried you in here. I barely registered her words, my mind fixated on a single thought: why was I still alive? That wine, was it really just ordinary wine? But I'd even said my last words, so now my deathbed confession had turned into a heartfelt love declaration. I'd rather be dead. I fell back onto the bed, feeling that life had lost all meaning. Shurong rambled on. His Majesty stayed with you all night and left at dawn. He said to wait for him. He'll come over tonight to talk about something important. Something important? What important thing? I racked my brain, but came up empty. But that night, Shunshin did not come. He only sent Fulai with a message. There had been a terrible flood in the north, with heavy casualties, and he was discussing disaster relief with his ministers, so he would be staying in the heart-nourishing palace for the next few days. Stuck in the cold palace with nothing to do, and surrounded by hidden guards that made escape impossible. I fetched a ladder and struck up a conversation with the elderly concubine in the next palace. The old concubine was advanced in years, her mind addled and her senses dulled. She mistook me for a maid, ordering me to bring her food and drink. After a few days, she grew familiar with me and began to tell me stories of the palace. She spoke of which concubine the late emperor had doted on the most, which concubine she had been closest to, and how some women had resorted to all manner of tricks to win the emperor's favor. These tales of the past were quite fascinating. As she talked, she turned to the late empress, Shunshin's mother. The late empress was a woman with a cold exterior but a warm heart. She helped me a great deal when I first entered the palace. Later, when she had a difficult labor giving birth, I waited anxiously outside her palace all night. That child was a lively one from the moment he was born. Crying at the top of his lungs, a smile spread across the old concubine's face as she recalled the past. He had a red birthmark on his lower back, shaped like an ink slab. Back then, the emperor said this child must be the god of literature descended to earth. Clatter! I lost my balance and tumbled off the wall, falling heavily into my courtyard and lying there motionless for a long while. Girl, are you all right? The old concubine called out to me, and I quickly replied, I'm fine. Your Majesty, I have business to attend to. I'll come see you tomorrow. I hurried back to my palace chamber, my mind reeling with shock. I had been Shunshin's favorite consort for years. How could I not know if he had a birthmark anywhere on his body? But there was no birthmark on his lower back at all. Was the old concubine rambling nonsense? Or was there something wrong with Shunshin? I was just an ordinary spy. Why did I have to unravel all these mysteries? I clutched my head and sank to my knees on the floor. I was so lost in thought that I did not notice someone entering the chamber. A pair of embroidered shoes appeared before me. I looked up, and the person moved lightning fast to cover my mouth. It's me. The intruder was dressed in a maid's uniform, and though 7 years had passed since we last met, I recognized her at a glance. Suyue, my best friend from Fayun Pavilion. My eyes widened in shock as I gestured for her to remove her hand. She let go, and I quickly stood up and pulled her into a secluded corner. What are you doing here? Suyue whispered. I've been ordered to take you back to the Lee state. Get ready, we'll find a way to leave tonight. I did not know whether to marvel at the organization's unwavering loyalty to me, or to rejoice at the prospect of a new life. In the end, I only nodded and rushed to pack my bags. I did not expect the opportunity Sue spoke of to come so soon. In the evening, Lin Shuang arrived at the cold palace with a retinue of maids. She smiled as she ordered her maids to carry all manner of jewelry and precious ornaments into my courtyard. Consort Rong, I was wrong to come here and upset you earlier. I've come today to apologize. She certainly knew how to bend and stretch with the wind. I stared at the jewels, blinking in surprise. What a pity, I would never get to use them. Lin Shuang did not stay long. She drank a cup of tea and then took her leave. Sue and I followed her out, quietly knocking out the two last maids in her retinue and taking their places. We kept our heads down and fell in at the back of the line. Lin Shuang muttered on ahead. What does she have to be so proud of? She can do whatever she wants only because His Majesty dotes on her now. When His Majesty tires of her, and with no powerful clan to back her up, we'll see how she fares. Her words trailed off, and her voice suddenly turned sharp and respectful. Greetings to your Majesty. I looked up in a panic. Shen was walking straight toward us. He had not come for days, so why now? Sue tugged at my sleeve, and I quickly stepped aside and knelt with the other maids, desperate to press my forehead to the ground. Rise. Shen's voice was heavy with fatigue. He must have been exhausted these past few days. For some inexplicable reason, my heart ached for him. He did not say much to Lin Shuang, walking straight toward the cold palace without a second glance. He passed right by me, his steps unhesitating. I had barely let out a breath of relief when he stepped back a few paces and stopped right in front of me. I clenched my handkerchief tightly, daring not to move a muscle. Shen stood before me for a few seconds, then slowly knelt down and let out a sigh. My beloved, what are you doing now? 7. Before he could finish speaking, Sue beside me drew a dagger and lunged at him. Sue's movements were lightning fast, a flash of cold steel, and the dagger was mere inches from his face. Shen, I cried out in alarm, instinctively reaching out to stop her, but I was no match for Shen's speed. He sidestepped the dagger, and with a single backhanded palm strike, sent Sue flying backward. She crashed to the ground, spitting up a mouthful of blood. I had no idea Shen knew martial arts. Sue was pinned to the ground by hidden guards, unable to move. Lin Shuang screamed in terror, fleeing with her maids at once. Shen pulled me to my feet and waved a hand at the hidden guards. Take her away. Sue was led off, and Shen took my hand and led me back to the cold palace. Dinner was already laid out, and he gestured for me to sit. I know you have countless questions right now. Eat first, and after dinner, I will answer every single one of them. The meal was pure torture. I sat on pins and needles, the food tasting like sawdust in my mouth. Shen ate very little too. Once the dishes were cleared away, he led me down to the dungeon. Sue had been tortured, her body covered in bloody welts and gashes. I instinctively tried to rush to her side, but Shen grabbed my arm and pulled me into an adjacent dark room, where we could see everything that happened in the torture chamber. Someone splashed cold water on Sue to rouse her, asking in a cold voice, "Speak, what is your true purpose here?" Sue's consciousness was muddled. She opened her mouth and spoke with great difficulty, "To take Nai Wei-chun away, and if the mission fails, to kill her, as punishment for Qiu Yuebai's betrayal of Feiyun Pavilion." Kill her. I stared at Sue, my fingers twisting the fabric of my skirt so tightly it wrinkled. "What is the reason for this?" the interrogator pressed. Sue hesitated for a moment, then said, "To hold Qiu Yubai hostage. If the mission fails, her death will be the price for Qiu Yuebai's defection from Feiyun Pavilion." The name Qiu Yubai struck me like a bolt of lightning, leaving me stunned from head to toe. Qiu Yubai was a legend in Feiyun Pavilion. It was said he had entered the pavilion at the age of 6, taken his first mission at 13, and roamed the various states, stealing top-secret intelligence and escaping unharmed from countless ambushes and manhunts. He had always been the person I admired the most, but I did not know him. How could my life hold his hostage? I thought conceitedly that the only person I could hold hostage was Shun. A flash of clarity cut through my muddled thoughts. I suddenly remembered the old concubine's words. If there really was something wrong with Shun, if he was not the real crown prince, then who was he? Could it be? I turned to look at Shun, my face drained of color in shock. Let's go, Shun said. The rest of the story, let me tell it to you. It was pitch black by the time we made our way back. Shun carried a lantern, leading me slowly through the palace corridors. The chambers of the cold palace had been decorated exactly like the Hanchun palace. We sat opposite each other now, but the atmosphere was nothing like it had ever been before, tense, thick with unspoken truths. Shun paused for a moment, then spoke. I have another name. You may have heard it. I am Qiu Yubai, 8. I won't waste time on what everyone already knows. I'll tell you what you don't. Qiu Yuebai's voice was calm and unhurried, as if he were telling someone else's story. At the age of 16, I was ordered to come to the Qi state. My original mission was to become the personal bodyguard of Crown Prince Shun, lurking in the Qi Imperial Palace. The mission was going smoothly. I succeeded in becoming Shun's personal guard. Shun was a playful soul. He often dared to sneak out of the palace with only 1 or 2 guards in tow. Once, he took only me with him, and that was the day everything went wrong. It had been the Lantern Festival. The streets packed with crowds. Qiu Yubai and Shun had quickly been separated in the throng. He had found Shun an hour later, lying in a filthy alleyway. His fine silk robes had been stripped from his body, his money pouch stolen, and 2 fatal knife wounds marred his chest. Crown Prince Shun of the Qi state was dead, dead without a sound, in the most absurd of ways. With his death, Qiu Yuebai's mission had failed. He had intended to flee the city at once, but a fierce sense of unwillingness had stayed his steps, and he had turned back, staring at Shun's corpse. He had made a decision. He would take Shun's place. They had been of a similar build in their youth. Qiu Yubai had bought a human skin mask from the ghost market, and 3 days later, he had returned to the palace. He had been confined to the East Palace as punishment. The Empress had scolded him, the Emperor had reprimanded him, and the palace maids had comforted him. Not a single person had noticed anything amiss. Not a single person had realized that the Crown Prince had been replaced. This secret had been Feiyun Pavilion's most closely guarded one. To prevent more people from discovering the truth, Qiu Yubai had sent a letter to Feiyun Pavilion. Now that he had become the Crown Prince, the palace still needed a Feiyun Pavilion spy by the Crown Prince's side. He needed the pavilion to send someone to take over his former mission. That spy would be the decoy. The visible piece on the board, Qiu Yubai, would be the hidden one, if Feiyun Pavilion's mission were ever exposed. The spy could be sacrificed to protect Qiu Yubai. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process his words. I bowed my head and thought for a moment, then it all clicked. So I'm that spy. I was sent here to cover for you. Qiu Yubai looked at me, and a smile tugged at his lips. Yes. I told Feiyun Pavilion to send a spy clever enough for the task. 9 Qiu Yuebai's confession. I told Feiyun Pavilion to send a fool of a spy, someone I could fool without expending much effort. 3 months later, I met Nai Wei Chun during the spring hunt. She truly deserved to be sent here. On the first day I brought her back to the East Palace. She couldn't wait to sneak into my study. If I hadn't dismissed the guards in advance, she would have exposed herself right then and there. When I pushed the door open, she knocked over a whole cabinet of books in a fluster, the smile on her lips not even having time to fade. How did she explain it back then? Oh, she said she was hungry and had come to the study to find something to eat. I had to stifle a laugh, and suddenly felt a twinge of regret. I always thought this Nai Wei-chun would become a variable. Later, facts proved my premonition was absolutely correct. She began to get close to me, to seduce me. She slipped that kind of medicine into my drink while I was reading, but as I lifted the teacup, I saw a ring of white powder on the black wooden table. She'd even forgotten to erase the traces. I sighed, looked up, and drained the tea in my cup in one gulp. I played along with her schemes, and slowly began to dote on her, to draw close to her. I would take her to the street to buy clothes and jewelry, treat her to all kinds of delicacies, take her to admire flowers in spring and watch snow in winter. She was happy, I could tell, truly happy. Soon, everyone in the capital knew that Crown Prince Shunshin had a favorite consort named Nai Wei-chun. Nai Wei-chun was different from any other spy I'd ever met. Her heart was not hard enough. She would save leftover food to feed stray cats and dogs, and squat at the back gate to hand out steamed buns to young beggars. She thought she hid these acts well, but every time she did them, the smile on her lips would stay for the whole day. There was no hiding it at all. Moreover, she seemed to feel guilty about deceiving me, so even though she sent her intelligence letters without fail every time, when I was good to her, she would quietly return that kindness. There wasn't much she could do for me, all trivial little things. She would collect morning dew to brew tea for me at dawn, pick fresh peach blossoms from the peach forest to make wine for me. For a spy of Feiyun Pavilion, every day is lived as if it were the last, never knowing when exposure might come. So at night, sleep often came hard. Nai Wei-chun would also wake up with a start in her sleep, and toss and turn afterward. Unable to fall back asleep, in turn, I also slept poorly, so my brows would furrow unconsciously. Later, Nai Wei-chun developed a habit. When she couldn't sleep, she would turn over and gently smooth the crease between my brows. She stroked my forehead little by little, day after day, never tiring of it. Eventually, I grew used to her touch, to her gentle caresses. I also grew used to doting on her. What started as a charade had, in the end, turned into genuine affection. I collected every intelligence letter Nai Wei-chun wrote each month, and she would always jot down trivial little things in them. For example, Crown Prince Shunshin had woken up late 4 days this month and early 20 days. Or that Crown Prince Shunshin did not like spicy food, preferring sour and sweet flavors instead. I kept her intelligence letters in a box, and whenever I was in a foul mood, reading a couple of them would always cheer me up. In the 3rd year after Nai Wei-chun came to my side, the two countries made a truce. The Li state had been plagued by natural disasters and man-made calamities for years, the national treasury long since drained, with no enough food and money to sustain a war. If the Li state was to take the initiative to seek peace, it had to show sincerity. So Feiyun Pavilion sent a secret letter to all the spies lurking in the Qi state: commit suicide to prove loyalty, all except me. Of course, for if this pawn of mine was exposed, peace between the two countries would never be possible. I intercepted the letter meant for Nai Wei-chun. I suddenly found that I could not bear to let her die. Feiyun Pavilion's actions had strayed further and further from the original purpose for which it was founded. They began to send assassins to hunt down and kill any spies who refused to take their own lives. The bodies of the spies became their gift of good faith to the Qi state. I fended off the assassins sent to kill Nai Wei-chun. I began to think of ways to protect her. Feiyun Pavilion also gradually realized that this fake crown prince of theirs had started to defy their orders. After all attempts to control me failed, Feiyun Pavilion decided to abandon me. Yet they could not bear to lose such a good pawn as the crown prince of the Qi state, so they planned to replace me. I secretly cultivated my own loyal followers, and openly clashed with Feiyun Pavilion for a full 2 years. Finally, in the early days of the 3rd year, I uprooted all the strongholds Feiyun Pavilion had set up in the Qi state. The emperor's sudden death catapulted me to the highest position in the Qi state overnight. I intended to make Nai Wei-chun empress only to give her another golden ticket to spare her life. With the title of empress, she would no longer be someone anyone could dispose of at will. But this also made Feiyun Pavilion realize just how important Nai Wei-chun was to me. They wanted to take her back before she could be crowned empress, to use her to hold me hostage. Unfortunately for them, their plan failed. 10. I stared quietly at Qiu Yubai, then sighed to sleep. But now I realize it's me who can't live without you. When you're not by my side, I can never sleep soundly. The night was deep. Shunshin held me from behind, and soon fell asleep. Now all the doubts were resolved, and I finally slept well for the first time in a long while. Shunshin did not kill Suyue. He gave her a chance to start over as herself. If she was willing, Shunshin would arrange a corpse to fool the people of Feiyun Pavilion, and from then on, Suyue would cease to exist in this world. Suyue left, and she did not come to see me one last time before she went. She did not want to see me, and I did not want to see her either. Shunshin once asked me if I wanted freedom, if I wanted to leave like Suyue. He would arrange everything and let me go. I thought about this question all night long. The next morning, Shunshin got up early to leave, and I called out to him. Shunshin's body stiffened slightly. Whatever it is, we can talk about it when I come back tonight. It seemed he was also avoiding my answer to this question. I did not let him have his way. I said, I've thought about the question you asked me. I want freedom. The tense muscles in Shunshin's shoulders relaxed a little. He turned to look at me, and there was still a smile on his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. Very well, I will arrange it. I cut him off. I do want freedom. But freedom cannot give me what I truly want. Shunshin froze for a moment. Then what is it that you truly want? I want to help the world and save the people. Want children to grow up carefree, at the very least, not to freeze or starve to death, I said. What I want is too much, too great. I cannot do it alone. So, will you walk this path with me? 11. The Empress coronation ceremony took place as scheduled, and after this ceremony, Feiyun Pavilion also struck its colors, halting all its actions. After all, they could not touch Shunshin now, nor could they touch me. If they continued to fight, their organization, which could only live in the shadows, would not survive. We and Feiyun Pavilion checked each other, reaching a bizarre balance. The spies of Feiyun Pavilion were still everywhere, lurking in other countries, stealing intelligence diligently. Shunshin and I lived a peaceful life for a long time. Sometimes we would go out of the palace to see how the people lived. Beside the bustling and prosperous Divine Marshal Street, there were still ragged beggars. They squatted in the corners, craving that the passing nobles would show mercy and give them some silver. I pointed at a young beggar sleeping in the alley and turned to Shunshin. Have I ever told you about my past? Shunshin shook his head, and I smiled. I was just like them once. I never had enough to eat or warm clothes to wear, and I was always scolded and beaten. Living in a tiny corner under the contemptuous gazes of those nobles, I thought I would live like this for the rest of my life, until one day, a man in a brocade robe squatted down in front of me. Little girl, I'll take you to a good place. Will you come? He took several young beggars with him and brought us to a place. I later learned that place was called Feiyun Pavilion. The first day I arrived at Feiyun Pavilion, I saw Qiu Yubai. He stood on the terrace at the top of Feiyun Pavilion and glanced down. Though he was still young, he was so dazzling that no one could look away. That's the most outstanding member of Feiyun Pavilion. If you want to be like him, you have to work hard. I was lost in thought when something suddenly bumped into my leg. I looked down and saw a little girl who had fallen to the ground staring at me in terror. She was terrified and kowtowed repeatedly. Mercy, my lord, mercy. A beggar's life was the cheapest of all. Even if those wealthy people killed a beggar, no one would hold them accountable. I had been like this once, walking on eggshells, careful with every step. I bent down, pulled her up, and stuffed a pastry into her hand. Go on. She stared at me in surprise, then ran away quickly. Shunshin asked me, why not give her silver directly? They're too young to keep it safe. We returned to the palace in the evening. As soon as I got back to Hanchun Palace, I hurried into the chamber, occupied Shunshin's desk, and buried myself in writing. It grew dark, and Shunshin came back from the imperial study.
He walked over to me curiously. "What are you writing, my beloved? Look." I handed him the sheet of paper filled with writing. "I want to set up an organization just like Fayun Pavilion." Shunshin froze for a moment. "To train spies." I shook my head. "To train children. I want to take in those young beggars and the children of poor families. We can hire literary masters to teach them to read and write, martial arts masters to teach them martial arts, and accountants to teach them how to use an abacus and do business. When they learn enough, we can recommend them to be book boys in wealthy families, or to join the army. Those who learn from the accountants can be sent to restaurants and inns as apprentices. They can support themselves with their own hands, and the country can discover more talents." Shunshin read what I had written carefully and then looked at me in surprise. "My beloved, you're a genius." I was quite pleased with his exaggerated praise. "Your idea is excellent. If we perfect the specific regulations, we can start implementing it soon." Shunshin folded the paper and put it on the desk. "My beloved, it's the shuar now, it's time to rest." I was full of energy at this moment, pulled out a blank sheet of paper, and started writing again. "I have many other ideas, and I need to write them all down one by one. You go to sleep first." Shunshin failed to persuade me and lay down on the bed alone. The candle burned out, and I lit another one. "My beloved, it's the high hour now, time to sleep." "Sure." I did not look up. "I'm writing the key part, just a little longer." I do not know how much time passed, but the person on the bed was still awake. His voice was full of resentment. "My beloved, it's midnight now." I really could not stand it. I stood up helplessly, picked up an outer robe at random, folded it, bent down, and placed it beside him. "There we go. Pretend I'm with you. Hurry and sleep." With that, I turned around eagerly to go back to the desk, but my wrist was held tightly. Shunshin pulled hard, and I fell onto the bed. He waved his hand casually, and the candle on the desk was extinguished. "My beloved, don't fool me with a robe." He turned over, held me in his arms, and trapped me in front of him, then sighed contentedly. "Sleep."